Hello, lovely colorists. I've had a bit of a mid-colouring crisis and I have taken all my Derwent drawing, all my Derwent Lightfast and my Luminance pencils and arranged them all into colour family order. And in this video I'm going to show you my process on how I did it in case you want to do it with your sets. And I'll even drop in a link so that you can download the colour chart that I made. So let's take a look. So very helpfully I had this colour chart from Colour with Claire, which was already in the colour family order of the Luminance. So on the most part I really like the way that the colours were put together on that one, and so I just cut up the colour families from that chart, and then I started chopping up the colour swatches from the Derwent Lightfasts, and that colour chart came from, where did that one come from? Colouring Bliss, that's the one. Another one of my favourite colourists on here. And then I just had these swatches that I had scribbled out from the Derwent drawing pencils. And what I'm basically doing is trying to figure out best effort of where each of these colours will go in these colour families, and then I get a little, as the number of colours in each set grew, I then broke it down a little bit more and just basically pushed all the little chips around until I felt that these colours were making sense to me. Now, the way I'm going to use this finished colouring chart means that I can quickly put together 3 or more colours in a blend of the same family, which I know that I would colour with. So some of the colours aren't artistically perfect for a colour family, but we don't have every single hue, every single shade, every single tone of every pigment possible. So there is obviously a little bit of leeway, but that works beautifully for colouring pencils. So what you need to remember with colouring pencils is essentially you need to have your mid-tone, a light tone and a dark tone. That's the basic principles is for a 3-colour blend, and then if you're colouring a bigger shape you can expand on 3 colours to give it a little bit more of a gradient. But all those colours don't necessarily have to be from the same family, but if I wanted to make something with a bit of a sheen or a bit of a two-tone, I can easily jump to one of the colour family selections above or below the colour family that I'm using for my mid-tone. Now what I mean by that is, for example, if I'm using a mid-tone which is more of a red, I can go for a red-orange as a light tone so that it looks like that shape when the light shines on it has kind of got a bit of a yellowy shimmer in the in the light, or a bit more of an orangey kind of light color to it. And likewise in the dark shading, to have a bit more contrast, because if you're not aware of my coloring style, I like quite a bit of contrast in my shading. And so for something like an object I'm coloring in red, I can either go for a red-brown, or I could actually go for a really deeper purple or more of a bluey red, so I don't have to stick with just light red, medium red, dark red, because that can be quite flat, it can be quite dull, and it's also not as realistic in my opinion, but everybody's got different preferences, so this just works really well for me. The other thing I wanted to do is, obviously when you get the pencil sets and you open them up and they've all been arranged how the manufacturer suggests it and they've got their own colour charts, is they usually put all the browns and neutrals at the back. So what you end up is you have all your fun colours at the front, and then you have to go rummaging in the back for either the real pale colours like creams and beiges, and all of the different browns and greys to add into your color blend. So I found myself jumping around quite a lot. And with this many pencils that I've got now, so these are just my higher Lightfast ones that I'm combining at this stage. And I'm probably going to do the same for my lower Lightfast ratings, so the ones that I'm going to grab for, you know, more quick colouring book ones, or ones that I don't want to splash out on and use my fancy pencils. So I'll probably keep those separate. So what I wanted to do here though with those browns and greys is, where possible, try and integrate them, because there are so many different undertones to browns and greys. And if you do download my colour chart and use it yourself, feel free to cut some of the swatches out and move them around as well if you don't agree with where I've put them. Maybe my lighting is different, or maybe our pigments in the pencils may have changed over time, or whatever the reason, it doesn't matter. Or maybe my eye just wasn't that good. But what I try to do is take, for example, in the reds, I wanted to find a brown which had that red undertone. Same with the blues, you know, which grey sets, which brown sets have kind of like that blue look. Because obviously no shadows are all one colour in real life, so if you're colouring in a shadow, it's still going to have that undertone of the object that the shadow is on, unless it is completely, you know, in the dark and in the black. So that's kind of where this idea of throwing them in a little bit more came in. And I also think it will help me a lot more with picking out skin tones, because another thing that I found with the way that the manufacturers and classic colour charts lay out their neutral tones and the things in the back, I still found myself jumping around all the pages of the pencils and the different trays to put together a skin combination, and that could be fair skin, dark skin, and everything in between. I just found it really quite hard to jump around and do that. So I'm hoping that just by having this arranged in this way might help me pull out colours a little bit easier, a little bit quicker, and then also when I then go to put them back, in theory, the colours that I've used for a blend won't be too far apart from each other. Now there are some colours over these three combinations that are very similar, so that's good. I'm fine with that, because what it means, if one needs replacing, I don't necessarily need to go out and buy another one. I would just end up deciding which of the two lines of pencil I preferred, and then just stick with that one and make a little note on my colour chart. I don't need to replace this pencil because it's covered with this one. So same with the open stock, because all of these pencils are open stock in this colour chart. So if any one of them goes, I've got quite a lot of other options to choose from. And another point I want to say when you're picking through these shades, so for example, some shades are very close to each other, and that means that when you're blending they might be so similar that it's almost too difficult to tell. Or there's two colours that are next to each other in my colour chart, because they just wouldn't fit anywhere else. But so for example in the yellows, maybe one is a slightly bit more of a green yellow and one is a slightly bit more of an orange yellow, but they didn't really fit anywhere else. I might not put those two colours together in a blend, but I could take one of those colours that I want for that object and still jump one or two shades lighter on that little row and one or two shades darker, and in theory either end of that colour I'm going to have options, but they will all go together, if that makes sense. But yeah, if you're a little confused by one or two of them that are next to each other and you're thinking, oh, they're not quite perfectly in harmony with each other in terms of pigment, don't worry about that. Skip over, so pick your favourite one out of it that you want for that object, skip over it and go for the next one down the chain until you've got your colours together. And for each of these chips, I'm just using just a little bit of the tape runner pen, just so that I can still peel it off. I'm not sticking it down too hard. I can play around with them, move them around, but I didn't want to, sneeze or something and have the whole lot fly everywhere. This whole swatching out took 2 sheets of paper, and then to finish the whole process, I then typed them all up into an Excel spreadsheet. I marked which brand pencil it was and the color, and now there's a very easy to print out PDF, which I'll pop a link to in the description for you below. So as long as that stays active on my Google Drive, you shouldn't have any problems getting hold of that. Just remember that some of these pencils have got the same name, so across the 3 different lines here. So when you're colouring out your colour chart, just be sure that you've double checked the line of pencil to the colour. And when I do go and colour out one of my swatches, I do make that mistake, but it's fine. I just cut out another tiny little piece, a little rectangle of paper, stick it on top, recolour it, easy peasy. Because with these highly pigmented ones, sometimes they don't erase out too well. So yeah, just for a nice clean colour chart, you can just stick a bit of paper over your little square and do it again. Struggled with, so I've done best effort. In other words, they're in a colour family like I mentioned before, which I could use as a choice for a darker colour, but there could be a couple of choices in that family that are slightly different pigments, but when I'm putting my blend together, I can have some options there for my darker shade. Do I want to go a bit more muted and vintage on the shading, or do I want it to be quite a bright, vibrant, dark area on that object? It all depends on what I'm colouring, really. With the greens, it was so nice to have so many choices for greens now, and all laid out for me now in the different kind of colour families. So the thing with greens is apparently the human eye can see more greens than any other colour, which is cool, which is why we look at yellows half the time. And if you buy one of those giant pencil sets that's got like 300, 400 colours in it, and there's like a whole ton of yellows, and 12 of them could easily just be the same yellow as far as we're concerned. It's very different with greens. We can see many more greens, and a lot of colouring pages that I've got, if I've got trees or if I've got flowers with lots of leaves, so I've got lots of forest and earth and nature pictures in a lot of the books that I've got, and so keeping that variety in the greens is really important, because you're going to have some more olivey greens, browny greens, yellow greens, all that stuff. But again, there's nothing to stop me saying, okay, well, I don't want this leaf to be a pure yellow green. I want it to go from yellow green to a brown green or to an olive green. I can look at the colors and I can do that, as long as I'm sticking to that rule again where I have light, medium and dark. The shading is still going to work, the color doesn't matter. And if you are interested, in my colouring tutorials playlist, there is a really cool one in there on how you can bring in other colours into your leaves to match your colour palette. So that's when I was doing some examples of working with Sarah Renee's colour cubes and using those in a colour palette, but then wanting to tie it in with the colours of the leaves. And I show you how you can bring in, your reds, your purples, your pinks and oranges and whatever into a green leaf, but it still look kind of realistic. But I'll put a link for the colour cubes as well below for you as well, because I don't think I've linked that in one of my videos lately, but they are really good and I do still use those, especially for colouring pages and for coming up with really effective, tried and tested colour combos. So the rest of this process speaks for itself, really, so I'll just leave this on super sped up. This whole start to finish took me a good couple of days of solid hyperfocus. And like I say, feel free to not be 100% satisfied with exactly how I've laid my colours out. I might still make some tweaks as we go. If I do, then the link below will just link to any updated versions I made. Just at the end where you've seen that I've printed it out and coloured it, that's just my draft copy, just to double check everything. I did get a little confused and miss off 3 colours because I wrote them in like 3 times or twice or whatever. So that's obviously fixed. And yeah, what I'll do now is I'll just put a little bit of a twinkling song to finish with and let you watch how this process finished. But thanks for joining me. Please feel free to like and subscribe, because I do appreciate having all you wonderful creative people coming along on this journey with me and helping each other out. So I hope to see you soon.